welcome back. Today is a What the Hell Is This special edition where we've got a whole series of movies as a What the Hell Is This. This is an example of what happens when a series doesn't produce good results after an acclaimed first film. Now there's plenty of series this has happened with, but this is a special case because it's like, because the series fell off a cliff after the first film. And everyone's just looking like, what happened? It's a good idea, what the hell happened? So it's a Crow series. And, oh boy. I mean, there actually is one film in this series that I actually think is one of the worst films I've ever seen. It's so bad that I didn't even watch it again for this video. Which is Crow Salvation. It was like, I'm not watching that again. I remember enough to know I don't need to watch it. And this is amazing because I actually did rewatch City of Angels for this video, but this Crow Salvation was one step too far. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I respect my time too much to do that one. But yeah, the Crow series, it's off a cliff, and we can tell why pretty quickly, because the sequels came under the auspices of Dimension Films and Harvey and Bob Weinstein. Now we all know who Harvey Weinstein is. We all know he's did some very dodgy stuff and now he's in jail. He used to be a big producer, now he always had a bad reputation around him, and the reputation, it was actually much worse than anyone thought, even though everyone had rumours over the years. And Bob Weinstein ran the genre division, but just some stuff they did well, like the Scream series and From Dusk Till Dawn, and they also bought a lot of rights to certain characters and then just absolutely bulldoze the characters with a lot of shoddy sequels that were terrible and no one wanted to see. Like, they had no quality control with some of these sequels. I mean, you've ever seen a Hellraiser sequel beyond the third one, you know what I'm talking about. You know, they did all the Dracula, Wes Craven Dracula films that no one seemed to have any respect for. And they messed up The Crow. The Crow just went from a peak adaptation of a comic book way up high to, what the hell was this? Pretty much in the second film. It was quite astonishing. The drawing quality was quite amazing. And I joked I was going to do this. And I think people now actually expect me to do it, so I have to do it. So I've done it. I've been threatening this one for a while in my head to myself, and now I finally through with it because I actually told people I was going to do it. And, well, here we are. So the first one is terrific. The first one's genuinely a pulp poetic film, and it is pulp, and it is, you know, romantic, and there's lots of flaws in it you can just hit at if you want to, because it is a revenge tale in the vein of RoboCop, where someone dies, they come back to life, and they get revenge on the creeps that killed them. It is pure RoboCop revenge type of story. But it takes that base and does a lot of fun, interesting things with it. It has characters you like. It has a terrific villain. It has an emphatic hero that you don't know that much about, but you feel for him. Brandon Lee played this character and famously died on set near the end of filming when a bullet was put in a gun by mistake. I'm not going into that, like, at all. But that happened. So this was his final film, and there's a tribute to him. It was a tribute to him to finish it off. So they had some doubles to shoot a couple of things where you saw him from a distance in the darkness. They had a few CGI things where they took takes from elsewhere and put them on a body to get from A to B for a couple of scenes. But it wasn't. It was so obvious the film had been like 90% shot with him. Most of the scenes were shot out. You could hear his dialogue all the time. It was fine. Didn't need to be double or anything. It was one of those things where, similar to when Heath Ledger died as Joker, a lot of the work had been done. There was just little bits and bobs that needed done, but most of it had been done. And all of it's on film. And he's really terrific. He understands the material, he understands what he needs to do. He understands when he has to be serious, when he doesn't. Because one of the big problems about people coming back from the dead for revenge tales, as we'll see in the sequels, is the character can be pretty monotonous or pretty weird or just a mess of things, which doesn't happen here. He comes back, he emphasises the pain of the character trying to make sense of his time, and as well as the freedom of the character because he can't get killed and he can get revenge and be still in pain. The pain's always there. There's also kindness to him. There's this sense of a human being who was decent, who was killed, and who's struggling with this revenge plot. So you actually feel for him the whole way through. Seems a very decent character. So whatever happens, you're always on his side. So it's a promise that really works. This would have been a film that would have elevated him and given him more parts. There's definitely a film that would have elevated him quite a bit in the film industry if his tragedy hadn't happened. So that works really well. Ernie Hudson appears as a cop, the one good cop, basically his Commissioner Gordon, but he's a street level cop sort of thing, and they're trying to make sense of it because he sees him earlier on because he was one of the cops that went to the location after the crow had been shot and his girlfriend had been killed, and he stayed with the girlfriend as she was dying. So that becomes a big plot point because he's one person that the crow can trust because he's obviously a decent person and he understands the pain of the crow. Doesn't have to agree with him, but he understands the pain of it. There's a little girl called Sarah who they were friends with, and she sees him as well. So that these three are the central ray of decency within this hellhole of a fantastical nightmare city that is not named, but it's just wonderfully done. And all the villains around them are horrible, horrible people. It's kind of like a really dark version of the Warriors, where everyone's a bit over the top, but it's much grungier and horrible. But it's a very over the top thing. And you have Michael Wincott as a big villain, who's got an incestuous relationship with his half sister, who has supernatural abilities. So there's supernatural stuff in this one, but it's not overdone. It's there, but the revenge is still the main issue, and the sense of loss, and it's him trying to come to grips with the death. So it's a film about loss, and it's also about revenge. But it's a very poetic image, made by Alex Proyas. This is his debut, and this was obviously a film he got into and he understood what he needed to do with it, and it's wonderful because it avoids making the exploitation element too dominant. It's there, it's needed there to get from A to B, to get to the plot point, but it doesn't hang down and become cruel within the film. He gets revenge on these people for what they did, but it doesn't feel cruel or horrible. It feels like just deserts a revenge story for a sin, and of course you're eventually going to get to the point where it's going to be him versus Michael Wincott, and Wincott's such a good villain and such a complicated villain. Even though the character is written pretty much as a villain, Wincott gives him a lot of little details that make him more complex. He has a sense of humour. He's very dangerous, but he's also a very pained character. So he can do anything. It's a terrific. This is an example of how you do a villain. It's like a villain you want to see destroyed at the end, and because the villain's so imposing, it makes the hero look a lot better. It's just a perfect way to do it. He just works so well. It's a very streamlined story. There's not much fat to it. It's 90 minutes in and out, but every moment counts, and it really delivers. So I was very impressed when I rewatched how strong this film was, because I've not watched it for 10 years. Because I saw it a lot when it came out and on video, and at a certain point I stopped watching it because I'd seen it too many times. But coming back to it, it was like, yeah, this is still very strong. You'd think, even though they'd lost their lead actor, you'd think, okay, we need to recast, but you've got a really good base because the mythology allows for a different avatar to come forward for a sequel, that you'd be in a good shape for a sequel. You have a good mythology you can build off to create something fascinating. They did not do that. They just remade the first film repeatedly. To a point where when you kind of got to the third one, people were just absolutely bored stiff and weren't going to go. The third film actually was not released in the cinema, it was just dumped in video because the producers saw it, this is so bad, you can't really do much. And the second one was such a disaster that, well, it's a disaster of their own making. Because here's the thing, the second one, when it first came out, it was a 1-star film for most people. It was like, because go from the highs of The Crow to this one, this compromised disaster of a film, was quite a shock, and everybody killed it. I mean, it was brutally killed by every critic. And deservedly so. I mean, there's no way to defend what happened in this film. But if you watch it 20 years down the line, it's the things that become obvious is it was made by a talented guy who gets screwed over by the studio, and it may have some flaws that I'll get to, and B, it's not a finished film. There's no way this is a finished film. There's so many scenes cut out of it that it was like it goes from A to B to C by going from A to C, and the B that actually is the character stuff is gone. Now they got our guy, basically got Tim Pope to direct it, who was a music video guy, and they brought him in, kind of like what happened with Fincher on Alien 3. They brought him in for the style, and they pretty much thought that he would just do the style and they'd do the story and it would work out that way. Well, he had some ambitions, and he was stuck with David Goyer as the writer, and Goyer's not the best writer. He tends to work better with people who are strong, who can take over the project. So, his best films are like Blade 2 with Del Toro, or the Dark Knight trilogy with Christopher Nolan, where he had strong collaborators who could push him. And this one, that obviously did not happen. The collaborators, it was pretty butchered, pretty much zoned the film, so did Tim Pope. And you can tell why, because it's obviously not what they wanted. Even though I've been a bit brutal with Goyer here, a little, it's not his fault, because I mean, basically you see the film is like, I don't know half the stuff that's not there that would have made sense to this thing. I know what the stuff I see is not that good, but I don't know what's missing, because there's a lot of stuff obviously missing. Because characters come in and then disappear for like 40 minutes, and they're meant to be main characters, and it's like, what the hell happened? So the idea is, it's 10 years later, Sarah has moved to LA, she's a character from the first one, played by a different actress, of course. Mia Kirshner is a very talented actress who gets nothing to do with this one apart from look haunted. She literally has nothing to do. It's like, why are you wasting her talent on this trash? Because you're giving her absolutely zero to do. It's a perfect epitome of just a useless female character because the makers don't have a clue. But yeah, feeling is there's a lot of stuff in the equipment floor that probably gave her stuff to do. So she's in basically to tell the new Crow why he's a new Crow, and that's it. But everything else is cut out, and it's like, wow, that sucks. And then they just kill her off at the end. So you end up with watching this underwhelming film, and then the one character who is related to the first film, who you liked the first film, even though she's not done well here, is then killed off just to make you feel even more depressed. Yeah, that's the kind of film this is. I'm sure in the original film, the original cut, there was much more. Because this film had a 2 hour 40 original cut. Or first cut. I'm sure it would never be that way ultimately. But it definitely feels like there's massive sections of the film that have been completed in the first cut. Then they've just cut stuff out. But they've left everything together. So there's bits are done well, and suddenly there's massive awkward edits. And it's just weird what's happened. It just feels weird. There's just they haven't like snipped it down to try and make it a cohesive whole. They've just cut bits out, like whole scenes out, and just left it because there's a mood to it that's interesting, then suddenly disappears. And also the kind of weird, annoying thing with this film also is how bad the action is. The first film was low budget, and the action isn't that distinctive, but it serves the character stuff, so it doesn't matter. It's enjoyable for what it is, but it's not the main thing. The action is there, it helps the character stuff, but you don't need it to be the most stunning action ever. This one is terrible. This one, action in this film was so bad that the fourth film Wicked Prayer, which is on a much lower budget, has better action. That film did not have good action, but it's better than this stuff. This film, they had their budget to do it, and people just jump around as if they move around in very kind of awkward ways, and it's like, this is the one bit you could have cut tighter, and that's one why I say I think it's a case of they had a first rough cut, and they just cut bits out of it and they didn't tighten it. Because there's some stuff here was like, if you tightened this a bit, it may have had more impact, or if you just played around with it, you may have done some more with it. Because it just feels like you're seeing too much of intros and outros of action that would have more impact if you cut it tighter. It just does not feel like it's been edited properly. Because it feels like a first cut edit a lot of the time. So you've got that problem. But you've also the thing is, you've got a crow that you don't care about, like, at all. And you've got a decent actor playing him. But again, why I feel it's been abandoned by the producers is that this is a French actor, Vincent Perez, and you feel as he should have been brought in to redub certain things just so it's clear what he's saying, that you can't hear. Because the accent, it's not like he has a terrible French accent, it's like he has a French accent that did a little bit of work and been fine, but it feels like they've shot the stuff and never come back in to redub it a little bit just to make it clear so you can understand what he's saying. It doesn't happen. So you have certain scenes where you understand what he's saying perfectly, and other times you're like, what was he saying? Which is a problem. And it's not really his fault. It's just like he's in a terrible film and he hasn't been treated well. Because, I mean, he really hasn't been treated well because of the other cuts. Because he filmed there's only half a performance here. So you can't really blame him for the film either. I mean, you can blame the director for the look of the crow. Because the crow look in this one is so much worse than the first. The first one, it looked like a visage of hell. He'd used makeup to create this thing, but it was really well done. This one, there's two lines down here, as if they're tears, and it's all white. And then this idea that the makeup is actually paint that he's used because his son used to paint all the time, and his son is the love that died this time rather than my girlfriend. So that's a good idea, and nothing's happened with it. And you're feeling this was obviously going to be something that was thrown away. The whole film would feel that stuff that's thrown away. There's a whole Day of the Dead thing that floats through it. It's all done really nice, the bits you see of it, but there's nothing done with it. It's like it feels like you've seen half of what it was meant to be, so you can't really get that tied up to it. And you have a feeling this was kind of meant to be much more of like a meditative film, a much more of a film about loss, and all of it get cut out just to get to the action scenes. So all the atmosphere just get drained away. There's one point where something blows up, and then you see the crow flying away, and these palm trees are on fire. And you're like, what's that got to do with what I've just seen? And you're thinking, I bet there was a scene here that was cut, and they just like the shot because it costs so much, so they're putting it there. There's stuff that happens. It's like, there's so obviously scenes cut out. So yeah, I mean, you've got Mia Kirsten as Sarah, who appears, gives information, then disappears for until she becomes a plot point again. There's a whole plot point with her and the crow that doesn't happen. And when you first meet, she's looking weirded out and strange, and you're feeling that half the scene is gone. Let's explain why she looks so weird. And this scene suddenly looks very awkward. And the director doesn't seem to be that comfortable with actors. It's like, whatever you bring to me, fine, because it doesn't feel like he's really worked with them, because the actors are all over the place. That's where it feels like they're all over the place. Like the villain is terrible. He doesn't do anything. He just sulks in his thing, trying to say how much he loves pain, inflicting pain on people, and he's basically a non-entity till the end. As opposed to Michael Wincott, who was so good. And it's like the director can't get anything out of him. Because he's unexperienced, he doesn't really know how to direct actors, and he hasn't cast well, and it just doesn't work. And you've other actors who are good, but aren't really directed, like Vincent Perez and Mia Kirsten, who are all very good actors. They've done how to do. And then you can see bits of them trying to do stuff, and it probably made context a longer cut, but in this thing it just doesn't make sense. And Vincent Perez jumps between being normal and being crazy in weird random ways, like you feel you're missing, like God knows how many scenes that made sense of it. It happens all the time because she basically have a non-character as a crow. There's a character here because so much has been cut out and it's just like getting A to B to the revenge stuff. And it's just this guy killing people and it's like, I don't care. Yeah, it looks cool. There's not even an ending. I have no idea whether he goes back and enters the afterlife with his son, which is suggested, but also you see a scene with him driving away as if he's going on other adventures. And they're put together as if that makes sense, and it doesn't. It's like, what's the ending, even? That's the whole film. It's just there's lots of weird stuff. There's a whole atmospheric thing where Iggy Pop gets died, and there's the Day of the Dead film to it, which really looks wonderful. It's the best scene in the film. Because I just feel that they've just cut it from they've just taken it from the first cut and just put it there, and it's like, okay, that's, okay, there's a better film here somewhere. And the end's weird because you've got a villain who basically hasn't appeared much, and you've seen all his flunkies get killed, and his flunkies are useless. They're not at all interesting the way the villains were in the first one. And Thomas Jane turns up as a sex addict killer in this one. Even he's boring. Because they're just vague characters that you haven't seen enough of to see how bad they are. And they're just these vague characters. And again, I don't know whether there was stuff cut. There's Iggy Pop. And even Iggy Pop's like, okay, just Iggy Pop. And there's this whole thing at the end where the crew's trying to climb this building. And then he falls off. It's like, he climbs the building and falls off. It's hilarious. You can't even do that right. There's a whole bit where they're having a villain fighting with the Day of the Dead. And it looks gorgeous. All these people in their masks and stuff, all looks gorgeous. But it's no impact because the stuff hasn't been built up. And it's like, it's one of those ones that's like, it's a producer thing. It's like, there's no way a film should be this incompetent. This is not a finished film. So that's why I can't be too savage on it, because it's not a finished film. There's no way a director would have put this out. It's an uncaring producers, and it's obviously the Weinstein brothers who did this. Because they have a reputation, but just after this, we had the Guillermo del Toro Mimic disaster as well, where he was brutalised too. So they had a reputation for doing this to directors at the time, and just generally. So, and everybody's pretty much put the blame on them from this one anyway, and it's like, wow, this is terrible. And so obviously they brought in someone to do an interesting sequel, and then they didn't like it, and they just butchered it. And it's a shame. It's one of those ones where I'd like to have actually seen what the original wanted to do, because it just feels there was something more there. Because I can remember Alien 3 get hammered, and then you saw the extended version, and it was much better and made much more sense. I'm feeling this would be the same. It wouldn't be a great film. I'm feeling there's some performance stuff that wouldn't have made it great, but would have made it more interesting and unique and weird. So now we're going to Crow Salvation. It's a piece of crap. It committed some mortal sin, right, of being the most boring film ever. That's why I call it the worst films ever. Technically it's not, but it's boring. They've got people like Kirsten Dunst and Fred Ward in there who tend to be good, and even they're boring. And they look bored as hell in this film. The Crow's a non-entity whiner who died in an electric chair, and he's useless. And there is absolutely no character to this guy, and it's tedious. And it's set in a strip club a lot of the time, so it's a lower budget, and even a strip club is boring, and there's lots of stuff about police corruption causing these deaths, and blah blah blah. And it's like a TV episode with a film budget. There's nothing here. There's just nothing that's worthwhile. It is the most tedious film. That's why I'm not going to talk about much, because I just refuse to watch it for this one. I just know it's boring. It's deep down boring where you're watching it, you're in pain watching it, because how boring it is. The worst kind of film. A film with no character. The direction feels very TV-like and dull, and there's nothing unique and weird about it. It's just boring. So, that's my take on it. It's just boring. Don't watch it because you're going to be bored. At least the second one was a epic thing that was butchered. This is nothing. This is a non-entity. It's like, let's make the most boring sequel possible just to not get butchered again by the Weinsteins. And what you got was a film so boring that everyone saw it and went, let's just release it in video. Let's not even go to cinemas with this one. Because it was meant to be a cinema release. It was hyped up it's going to cinema. This is the film that's going to bring back The Crow after this disaster of the second film. And then suddenly it was in video and DVD, and that's how I saw it. And it was like, whoa, that's you pretty much telling the audience this is bad. And it is. It's actually worse than any review could ever say, because it's so dull. And now we get to the fourth one, Wicked Prayer, which is a massive improvement over these last two films. Even though it's a low budget, and it has lots and lots of flaws. It's crazy. It's a crazy film. It's partially a black comedy. It's what happens when a film series hit such a low consistently that they just give it to a weird director. They just do what the fuck you want. Just do what you want. We don't care. Just bring it in time, and we'll release it in a few cinemas to see it get a cinema release, and then we'll put it in video, and that's it. We don't care. We literally could not care less what you're doing. This is what happens. When you get a film that you can tell the budget's low, like the action stuff is not good. The action stuff, they just did not have the money for it. And there was certain problems with the film where the Crow makeup had to look like the Crow makeup in the second film because it was cheap and it was easy to eye things, which did not suit the actor. Edward Furlong plays the Crow. He's a smaller guy, but a more intense actor. They hired an actor to play the Crow this time, which worked in a lot of ways, but in the presentation, they should have changed the Crow makeup to make it more... Because it's set in Indian reservation. They made it much more Indian, and made it creepier, and played up the fact that he's got weird, intense eyes. They could have done something really cool and scary. But they had to do this. I feel there's a Weinstein thing where it's like, you have to do this traditional thing so we can mark it as part of the Crow series. And it's the thing that kills the movie, because it's like, you have not helped the actor like, at all. No matter how much he works out or anything, he's not a big imposing guy like Brandon Lee was. So you have to do something different. You have to take what's there and actually use it. And they're doing that with the action stuff, but with the makeup, no. Because he actually looks more intense and crazy without the makeup. It's the one of those things, the makeup goes on and actually hinders him. he can cover the crazy without the makeup. So, the film itself, though, is a lot more interesting because they have to deal with character stuff rather than supernatural. Because they don't have the money for lots of shots of things exploding and all the rest of it. So they have to go for character. And this is where it works and doesn't work for some people. Because I like it because it's weird. It's really weird. And you may hate it because it's really weird. Because it's like, we don't give a fuck. We don't care. We're going to do this weird film. We're going to amuse ourselves. And either you're into that or you're not. So it's one of those things like, I can't recommend it to anybody, but I can say, well, you may as well give it a try. It is genuinely weird. And it's the one Crow sequel that gets into the idea of the actual pain of somebody you love dying. It's actually because they had actors rather than models, or hire an actor who speaks French and needs time to get the accent right, and they don't give him it. It's like one of those things. It's like they didn't. So they did one few times, but then they messed it up by just having them given the makeup that didn't work. And even actors who I don't like usually actually turned out okay. I mean, David Bowie is the villain, who's Angel from Buffy and his own TV show, who's not an actor I like that much, but he's enjoyable here because he's playing a villain, and he's also playing a villain with a human side too. And he goes way over the top towards the end, which makes sense in the plot, but might, annoy a lot of people. I think it did, because it was just like, why is this funny now? What's going on? I thought I liked that, but a lot of people do not like that. Like, it's your taking a piss of your own film, and it's like, yeah, have you noticed that already? They've been doing that since the start. And there's just lots of that. But a lot of the supporting actors are actually good. They've got his crew. For the first time for years, there's a distinctive crew of people with actual motivations. Because the whole idea of this is they're on an Indian reservation. The villains are miners who have been screwed over because the mine's shutting down, and the Indian chiefs have decided to open a casino. So they're pissed off because they've come here, and the family members die in the mine. They don't have a future. they're just mad at everybody. There's a high criminal element in the area, and a lot of them have done time already, and they're just mad and angry at everybody, and they're just actually out to cause hell before they die, basically, because it's like, we have no future. And it's like, that's something way more interesting than the villains have been before. And they have funny stuff going on there. So you've got War, who's just mad and angry, but he's got a conscience and it's kind of gnawed at him, but he still gets pushed by Bowie character to actually just be vicious and nasty. You've got a cook who just wants to beat people up with a baseball bat because he's so much full of rage. You've got a guy who's dying, who's an expert with chemicals, and he's dying because of all the stuff he's been dealing with for years, and he's just been thrown away by the company. So you've got all these people with character stuff that's interesting. And you've got Crow, who's actually an ex-criminal. He's on parole, and he's killed someone before he's even the Crow, so he's hated by everybody. You know, the law hates him because he's a criminal. The Indian reservation people hate him because he killed one of their own. And he's also friendly with the daughter of the head of the reservation. They hate that too. Like, everybody hates him. He's just trying to go through parole so he can leave the area and just say, okay, hell with you guys, I'm going. But it's a character that's very flawed. And that's an interesting take on it. And how I would follow along to play him, because he's a much more haunted actor than who they usually have. And there was a lot more character stuff before he turns into the Crow, which makes sense, because if you hire an actor, you want an actor to actually act. So it's a more interesting dynamic. If they just got them at the face right, they had a bit more money. Because one of the big problems with this film is, they know what they want to do, but sometimes the money runs out, and they get into A to B. Sometimes a problem, try to explain and go from A to B plot. There's like certain scenes seem to have not been put in, that seem to have been taken out because either they wasn't shot or wasn't shot right because they'd done low budget and they were running from place to shoot. So the film does have that problem, a budget problem, a film with not enough money for what it was trying to do. Which is funny because opposed to the last two films, we had too much money for doing almost nothing. So you have this idea as the Crow in this one is killed, and when he becomes a Crow, he gets both mad in an angry way, but also mad in the sense that he can't quite believe, like, he shoots himself and he's like, what? And he's a character who definitely wants to die. He's kind of had enough of people. He's just trying to die, and he has to keep on going back to fight these people who killed him. And he's not the most motivated Crow, which is things I really like, is the idea, like, he wants to get them out, but these were people who killed him, who were his friends. It wasn't just a random thing, his friends killed him. The whole sequence is, they've ground a spell, and it's, the idea is, a person with eyes of prophecy, which is his girlfriend, and a cold-blooded killer, which is him, because he's a killer already, and it becomes this thing is we killed them to raise the devil, but they're raising the devil in a kind of local sense of, we'll just try to kill as many people as we can around here because we're so sick of them, which is a motivation that actually is understandable. Sometimes it's done too broadly, and I think the supernatural stuff sometimes is done too cheaply, and it's a bit confusing. But you still get the whole idea, like Boreanaz is this guy who is viewed as lower class by everybody around him, and views as a scumbag, so he never had access to romance the girlfriend of Furlong's character. Furlong is lowest of the low, and even he's high on this guy in everyone's eyes. So, and all these people who are the villains all have a kind of a grudge against the others. And they end up going to her houses where Dennis Hopper's a pimp, and he's all this satanic stuff as well. And everybody who's the villains are all damaged horribly. So it's like one of those things is, the story's all interestingly written, it's just they don't have the budget for it. And there's some production stuff that's like, you have to do it with old films that gets in the way. But when they're actually doing their own stuff, like kind of character stuff of the Crow coming back, and actually how weirded he is by it, and how weird he is, and he's a guy who has no faith himself. He's actually walking through his life and seeing all the damage he's caused people as well. So he's not just haunted by his loss, he's haunted by his decisions before he died. All that stuff's interesting. It's just that you wish they had more money because it's a bit slipshod at times. So it's a weird film. It's the best of the sequels, but it's also the shoddiest of the sequels. I take shoddy and weird over slick and boring any day. So I still like this film, even though it's very flawed. It's a really flawed film. I can't recommend it to you as a good film. I can recommend it as a interesting, weird little sequel that you might like, you might hate. But there's interesting stuff there. They cast it with actors, and they let people Dennis Hopper go over the top. They bring Danny Trejo in as the tribal leader, and he's like got his own problems. So there's lots of stuff that's interesting. It's just that it's a weird film, so just accept that it's a weird one. So there we go. So that's the Crow series. Terrific first film that understood what it was. One sequel that was butchered, one sequel that was bloody awful boring film ever, and then a final sequel was direct to video that is weird and interesting and deserves some sort of love because it is so weird and there is some ambition there. So there we go. Hope you enjoyed this video. I said, what the hell is this down? I've got Highlander 1 and 2 to do soon. Yeah, I know. So, there we go. I'll see you later. Goodbye.